We're joined by Congressman Seth Moulton, the Marine Corps veteran. The Massachusetts congressional delegation has forcefully decried the federal government's actions in Minnesota. Here's a little bit of what the Congressman Moulton had to say over the weekend.
Because it is murder. And you pathetic little cowards who have to wear face masks because you're so damn scared couldn't even effectively wrestle a guy to the ground, so you needed to shoot him. This is why ICE needs to be prosecuted. Yeah, I voted to defund it, but ICE, you need to be prosecuted.
Congressman Moulton joins us now. Congressman, thanks for your time.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Congressman, thank you for joining us. Is there any chance that there is going to be any prosecution? It didn't happen after Renee Good, and I think a lot of people are skeptical anything's going to happen this time either.
I mean, it's incredible. This is state-sponsored terrorism. Executing protesters in the street is what happens in Iran, right? Remember when Trump just a week ago was saying that we might bomb Iran to prevent them from executing protesters in the streets? And yet he's not willing to stop it in Minneapolis. In fact, he's willing to do everything he can to cover it up, to normalize it, and to make sure that these officers are never held accountable to the law that they're supposed to enforce. So will they be held accountable? Look, I have an abiding faith in America, even though we are severely at a test right now. I mean, our democracy is severely under threat. I think they will be prosecuted eventually, but will they be prosecuted in the short term? Doesn't seem likely so long as the Republicans are in charge.
Well, that's what we
How do they get, wait. How do they get prosecuted eventually? I've heard that comment from, actually, maybe you're the second elected official that said that. If it turns out that the collection of evidence is half-assed, the sites are not secured, and it seems to me the only, quote, evidence to rely upon are videotapes, which to me are pretty compelling, but it's not a thorough investigation. How do they ever get prosecuted?
I mean, some people don't like the comparison to the Gestapo. I think it's a legitimate comparison to be thinking about. Of course, that was worse in total, but the individual acts are things that we're seeing today. And of course, the Nazis tried to cover all that up. They didn't preserve evidence, and yet there were a lot of Nazi crimes that were prosecuted well after the fact. So I do think there is a precedent here for holding people accountable, even if evidence is confiscated if they're trying to cover it up in the short term.
You know, we've had a couple of callers who've been talking about this all day long who are frustrated. They think that the Democrats aren't going to be able to do anything because they are outnumbered and they're and that ICE is going to remain. I mean, Trump is saying different things. Maybe he'll take them out at some point, et cetera, but that this is just going to keep happening in Minneapolis or then move someplace else. So what really can you do?
Well, first of all, we can be so outspoken about this in holding Republicans accountable that they have to start saying something. And thankfully, just in the last 24 hours, that has started to happen. There are about 3 members of the House or Senate on the Republican side who have said we need to have an investigation. Even the great Marjorie Taylor Greene questioned the Trump administration on this. It's amazing that where political courage can come from in the Republican Party these days. But that is starting to have an effect. I mean, I have been calling out Republicans specifically by name, including Minnesota Representative Tom Emmer, one of the top-ranking Republicans in the House of Representatives, for completely betraying his oath to the Constitution and his duty to serve the people of Minnesota. So I do think it's starting to have an effect, and ultimately we have to get a few more Republicans to come on the right side of truth, history, and the law, and put a stop to this. But the other thing we have to do, Marjorie, is we got to win. We got to win the midterms by a lot. We got to win the midterms big. We got to out with the old, in with the new. Democrats have to show that we can make changes to win back the people that we lost in the last election. And that, by the way, that does take change. You can't just keep doing the same old thing and say, I know you rejected us last time, but vote for the same thing this time. But if we show that we are willing to change, that we can stand up and fight the way the American people want us to fight, then we're going to win these midterms big, not by a little, and then we'll have a real mandate to do all the things that Americans want us to do to hold these Republicans accountable to the law.
Yeah, but Seth Moulton, if the rate continues, and we all hope it doesn't, the killing an American citizen exercising their First Amendment rights at the rate of once a week, there'll be 40 more dead people by the November elections. Your Senate Democratic colleagues say, some of them anyway, they're going to vote against this extension of ICE funding. I think it's 65 billion overall, 10 billion for ICE. Even if they were to do that, what's the practical consequence in terms of ICE's ability to continue to operate and abuse people like they've done? What would happen if they voted against the funding?
Well, it remains to be seen exactly. Obviously, Congress is supposed to have the power of the purse. But under Trump, the Republicans have basically ceded it to the White House, and the White House has shown that they're willing to go around the law to continue funding things. Remember, not that long ago, we had a government shutdown, and the troops were not going to get paid, and then Trump just basically violated the law and used funds he was not allowed to use in order to get them paid and avert a political problem for him. So you're right to raise these questions, Jim. We're in unprecedented times with a completely lawless administration, but it doesn't mean that Congress shouldn't try. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't use every lever that we have. I mean, I can't frankly believe the Democrats in the House who voted to fund ICE just a week ago. I certainly wasn't one of them. I've voted against funding bills just to use this leverage, and it will eventually have an effect. I mean, look, Republicans are starting to realize they've got a real problem with health care because we've been calling them out on health care. So we've got to do these things and use whatever lever we have in the short term and not lose sight of the importance of winning the midterms and winning them big. By the way, people say, what about the midterms not happening, Seth? Well,
Ah,
again, legitimate concern. But you know how you prevent that? It's by being way ahead in the polls. Because Trump can influence the midterms if they're like, you're a half point off or whatever. It's one thing to ask the attorney general in Florida, in Georgia rather, to find 20,000 votes. It's another to ask him to find 1,000,000 votes, right? So we got to have a big lead going into these midterms in the polls to make it much harder for Trump and his goons to manipulate or influence the election.
well, I think a lot of people are worried about that these things of all these troops in the streets are preliminary to what we may see in blue states in the election, intimidating people of color or anybody who speaks Spanish, even if they're American citizen, from voting. And Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, earlier said, well, they'll get out of Minnesota, the ICE, if you tell us everybody who's illegal in the state, and we'll get to see the welfare rolls and we'll get to see voter rolls. And so that the federal government ends up running the election. Now, Minnesota people have said they're not going to do that, but I think that's what so many Americans are worried about, that the midterms won't be, that they'll be rigged.
Well, that's why I'm saying, like, there's two things we can do. One, hold public officials accountable. Like when they come to testify before Congress, we need to ask them questions about how they're going to handle themselves in the midterm, including military officers who come before the Armed Services Committee, for example. But the second thing is we've got to put ourselves in a strongly winning position, not where we eke out a win just based on opposition to Trump, but where people are affirmatively choosing Democrats so that we can win by a lot. It makes it harder for Trump to influence the elections. But I'll tell you what, in the meantime, I'm not glossing over the fact that more Americans are going to get hurt. And we'll do everything we can to try to stop that. But look, it's a frightening time. It's a frightening time for America. I would love to come on your show and tell people, don't worry, we've got it all under control. But the honest answer is we don't. And when my sister, writes me over the weekend and says, Seth, you're going to tell me when we have to leave, right? Like when I have to take the kids and go to Canada or something. I mean, she was deadly serious after seeing what happened on the streets of Minneapolis. And I met with a constituent in a Massachusetts resident in Lowell who said, she's a black woman, and she said that every time her daughter just flies to Massachusetts and deals with customs and border officials or whatever, they question her, reading her the Riot Act and asking her if this is your real name. And by the way, she said, my family came here in the 1600s. But that's just because she doesn't look white.
Seth
She's not white.
Moulton,
So,
can we bring up a unrelated, other than the fact that it's Trump inspired, of all the nauseating things that he has done, let's say in the last week, right up there at the top was he made a comment about, and by the way, we're talking to not just the congressman, but a guy who served 4 tours of duty in Iraq. He was on the air talking about the United Kingdom. a place where, for the most part, the new Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, has gone out of his way to try to charm Donald Trump in every way he can. Here's what Trump said. They, talking about Afghanistan, sent some troops there. They stayed back a little off the front lines. And Keir Starmer responded by not only saying that 457 Brits were killed in Afghanistan. Here is what his response to Trump's remarks were.
I consider President Trump's remarks to be insulting and frankly appalling.
My message to Donald Trump would be that you need to turn around and say, these were unfortunate remarks. I didn't mean to denigrate the contribution that certainly the United Kingdom has made to the United States fighting on operations in places like Iraq, Afghanistan, and other theaters.
And by the way, even Rod Stewart, a right-winger that he is, called Trump a draft dodger and criticized him. Trump subsequently, in an interview, called the Brits among the greatest of wars. Of course, he never apologized, which he never does for anything. What was your reaction to Trump's comments about a country who sacrificed 457 of their people for the cause?
Well, first of all, he is a draft dodger. And what he should have said is very clear, very simple. He should have said 457 British families made the ultimate sacrifice, not just for the United Kingdom, but even more for the United States of America, because all of this was in response to an attack on America. 457 British families fought with us in Iraq and Afghanistan. And my family, the Trump family, did nothing. That's what he should say.
Congressman Moulton. Oh, I just want to ask one more thing.
No, go ahead. Sure.
I have time. Congressman, I'm thinking if Trump were a regular politician looking at the midterms, or he's not going to be running again, we hope, but you'd say, okay, I closed the border. I did what a lot of Americans wanted to do, and it was a big thing in the election. I closed the border. People aren't coming over the border anymore. Just declare victory, emphasize that he's done that, and then go back to talking about how much it costs for a hamburger or the economic issues or the home issues. So is he just hypnotized by Stephen Miller? I mean, obviously, this is not helping him or the Republicans.
Nope.
What's up, do you think?
Nope. He's hypnotized by Jeffrey Epstein. And
okay.
I know this, to some people, this will sound political to bring this up, but I honestly think this is what's going on. He is creating all this chaos because at this very moment, the Epstein files are supposed to be being released. The only thing that has ever hurt him with his base. And whether it's Venezuela or Greenland or Minneapolis, he wants the news to be about anything other than Jeffrey Epstein, because that's actually what could hurt him.